Most people walked past him without a second glance. But in Oregon State University's Memorial Union, a bronze bust gazes south, eyes wide open, even though the man at honors could not see. This is Benjamin Franklin Irvine, Frank. Blind, fearless, unstoppable. From a small Oregon town, he became an editor, a reformer, a civic fighter, a man whose words and actions shaped an entire state. He didn't just publish a newspaper. He gave people a voice. He proved that blindness wasn't a barrier to vision. And through advocacy and the press, one man changed how Oregon saw itself. It began in 1857 in Scioto, Oregon. Scioto calls itself the covered bridge capital of the West. 5 historic bridges line its covered bridge tour, part of the 8 that still stand in Lynn County. The town is also home to the ZCBJ Hall, a lodge built in 1922 by the area's once thriving Czechoslovak community. Frank's father, Jesse Baird Irvine, was a restless dreamer from Kentucky who left the South because he opposed slavery and had no use for a corkscrew, his way of saying no to alcohol. He settled in Scioto and tried everything: postmaster, mayor, miner, dairyman. Frank grew up watching him chase one dream after another and learned a lesson that would shape his life. Dreams don't survive on hope. They survive on fight. And growing up in this small, ambitious town, Frank began finding his own direction. By his early teens, Frank was already making his mark. He printed a hand-set newspaper, sold stories for pennies, and saw one published in the Albany paper. He pitched baseball, mastered Morse code, and graduated from Willamette University by age 20. Then came the moment that changed everything: a friendly boxing match in a baggage car. One punch shattered his left eye. Vision slipped, first one eye, then the other. For 12 long years, he traveled the country seeking help from city doctors. By his 40s, the darkness was complete, and yet he said the worrying was over. But Frank didn't quit. Not then. Not ever. In 1883, he married Gertrude Avery, Trudy. She was 15, the daughter of Corvallis's founder, and became his eyes, his business manager, his anchor. Frank bought 2 struggling newspapers, the Benton Leader and the Corvallis Times, for $5,000, half borrowed from a grocer. Trudy kept the books. Frank lit the pages on fire, exposing railroad tycoons, corrupt politicians, and fighting for fair pay for laid-off workers. Frank didn't stop at local issues. He condemned the takeover of Hawaii, protested massacres during the Boxer Rebellion in China, opposed the colonization of the Philippines, and supported Cuban independence. His speeches were praised as entertaining, forcible, often bordering on the dramatic. Even his lighter editorials were memorable. One targeted local umbrella thieves. "He who steals my purse steals trash, but he who steals my umbrella is a knock-kneed, low-down skunk." In 1903, Frank ran unopposed for mayor of Corvallis and spent nearly all of his term fighting for clean water. The city relied on the Willamette River, barely filtered and never disinfected. Typhoid and contamination were constant threats. Frank pushed for a new supply from Rock Creek on Mary's Peak. His editorials called the river the sewer of the Willamette Valley, warning of disease and floating carcasses. Voters approved $75,000 in bonds. When a typhoid outbreak killed a mother and 3 children, the urgency became undeniable. The Rock Creek system was a success, eventually supplying 4 million gallons a day. It still serves Corvallis today. By 1908, Portland came knocking. The Oregon Journal needed a voice with fire. Frank, completely blind, became editor-in-chief. He exposed a deadly railroad cover-up, fought for clean milk, and dictated thunderous editorials entirely from memory. He championed education for the blind. Largely through his influence, the legislature approved $60,000 for a new dormitory at the School for the Blind in Salem. Frank was a natural public speaker. In 1920, He delivered 35 speeches across Oregon, guided by his wife, Trudy. Over his career, he may have given more than 1,000 speeches. Travel was not easy. Once on the way to Hood River, their car hit ice and crashed into a telephone pole. Frank suffered multiple injuries, including 12 stitches on his shin. Yet he refused to cancel, leaving the hospital just in time to speak. Frank's ties to Oregon State ran deep. He spent 27 years on the Board of Regents, helped hire President Kerr, and witnessed the college grow. In 1927, he received an honorary doctorate. A year later, he laid the cornerstone of the Memorial Union, where his bronze bust stands today. The sculpture by Adrian Voisin captured Frank's fire, resolve, and vision. Thousands of friends contributed, their names filling 2 large volumes presented to him in gratitude. When the bust was unveiled, Frank, blind, touched the cold bronze face and smiled. In April 1940, Frank, already in poor health, was recovering from surgery when a fire broke out at his home in Portland. Frail but fearless, he and Trudy climbed down a ladder to escape. Days later, Frank Irvine was gone. His death was reported in over 100 newspapers across the United States and Canada. The Medford Mail Tribune praised his lifelong crusades. His head was always in the clouds, but his feet were always on the ground. No one had a more practical view of Oregon's future, or a clearer sense of how a bigger and better state could be built. Frank is buried in Rose City Cemetery in Portland. On his tombstone are written these words: "To serve his state and his people was to Frank Irvine a beautiful adventure, a privilege without price, a responsibility without limitations, a liberty too precious to be appraised." In humble words and simple sentences, he capitalized the human side of journalism. He was a great American. Trudy passed away in 1954. The Oregon Journal wrote, "She turned his black despair into hope." So the next time you walk through Oregon State's Memorial Union, stop by a sculpture. That bust isn't just looking out the window, it's looking at you. A reminder that darkness doesn't win. Words do. Courage does. And one blind editor from SCIO changed Oregon forever. Being blind in the late 1800s wasn't just a challenge. It was a sentence. But Frank had already learned what most of us never grasp. The worrying was over. For Frank Irvine, darkness wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the fight that defined him. His story shows what's possible when courage outshines circumstance. Thanks for watching. If Frank's story moved you, like and share this video. And next time you see a statue, pause and ask it a question. You never know what story is waiting to be told.